I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
It will no longer be possible for me to give so much of my time and energies to the charities and issues for which I care so deeply.
The royal family is known for keeping emotions in check, but even they have their breaking points. Something happened recently that left Prince William completely shaken. It wasn't a public event or a political crisis. It was something far more personal, tied directly to his father, King Charles. Sources say a final request came through Princess Anne, and it hit William harder than anyone imagined. Now, people are asking what was said and why it caused such a strong reaction. Was this the moment everything changed for the heir to the throne? Join us as we reveal Prince William's emotional collapse and the King's final request. The impact of King Charles' illness. It's hard to ignore how fast everything started to change after King Charles publicly confirmed his cancer diagnosis in early 2024. For many people watching, it felt like a moment that shifted the direction of the monarchy itself. And behind palace doors, it may have forced some conversations that the public will never fully hear. But, as we're about to reveal to you, the emotional pressure around Prince William has only grown heavier since that day. The announcement came through a statement from Buckingham Palace. It explained that after a routine hospital procedure for a benign enlarged prostate, a form of cancer was discovered. While they didn't say which type, they made it clear that the king had already started regular treatment and would be stepping back from public-facing duties for a while. What wasn't said was just as powerful as what was. The king's health struggles with cancer raised concerns about the monarchy's stability. Charles had only been on the throne for a little over a year when the diagnosis was revealed. At 73, with decades of preparation behind him, his reign had just begun. Yet within months he was suddenly forced into the background. As weeks passed, royal watchers noticed how often William was taking on more. He stood in for his father at high-profile events, made appearances on behalf of the crown, and gave speeches that would usually fall under the king's duties. Even though the palace tried to keep the mood calm, the shift was visible. Charles wasn't completely out of sight, but his outings were rare. He attended the Easter service at St. George's Chapel in Windsor Castle, waving to crowds and smiling. But people noticed he looked thinner and more tired than before. Each appearance seemed carefully planned, as if meant to reassure the public that he was still holding on. But the diagnosis meant that key decisions about the future had to be made sooner than expected. And it's during moments like these that the king would likely turn to people he trusts most. While the palace never gives full details, it's widely believed that Charles holds private conversations with his sister, Princess Anne, more than many know. Their lifelong bond goes back decades. She's known to be one of the few people in the family who speaks to him directly and honestly, without ceremony. If there were ever to be a final request, a personal, emotional one, from the king to someone really trusts, it wouldn't be surprising if it came during this period. Not as part of a royal will or legal document, but something human. And if William were ever to hear what that request was, especially if it placed a sudden new weight on him or revealed a truth he hadn't been prepared for, it could break the ground beneath his feet. Charles' health story is about the system around him adjusting, trying to stay strong while holding back the full weight of what's to come. If you're familiar with recent news, you'd know that the king's treatment continues, but the implications are already here. And reports are indicating that they are felt most of all by the son who now finds himself carrying far more than he ever expected. And while Prince William stepped into the spotlight, Princess Anne also moved into position, with the calm steadiness she's known for. From the moment the king's health was made public, Princess Anne's schedule began to fill even more. Already famous for being the hardest-working royal year after year, she seemed to increase her presence. Whether it was visiting regiments, attending overseas engagements, or representing the crown at formal events, Anne did it without fuss and without drawing attention to herself. It was just service, as always, but this time something felt different. Her name was appearing more frequently beside key state duties that would normally fall to the monarch or the Prince of Wales. People started to notice that if Charles couldn't be there, and if William was tied down with family matters, Anne was often the next one trusted to step in. Princess Anne has never been one for fanfare. She rarely gives interviews, and when she does, her answers are brief and practical. Her loyalty to the crown is total, but not emotional in the way others may show it. Instead, she serves with discipline and a sense of duty that was shaped directly by her parents, especially Prince Philip. Many royal watchers say she inherited more of Philip's straightforward nature than anyone else in the family. What makes Anne especially important during this crisis is her influence behind the scenes. Even within the family, Anne's voice holds weight. She's known to speak plainly in family discussions and isn't afraid to challenge an idea if it doesn't make sense to her. And that kind of honesty becomes important when the monarchy faces moments of real uncertainty. Decisions about roles, responsibilities, and even how public messaging is handled may all pass through informal conversations that Anne has likely been part of. This isn't the first time she's stepped up during a time of transition. Back when Queen Elizabeth II lost her father, King George VI, the royal family leaned heavily on Princess Elizabeth's inner circle. As time went on, and Elizabeth's children took on more, you could say Anne was always one of the first to carry part of that weight. During Prince Philip's funeral in 2021,
this is Prince Philip's coffin there being carried and to be placed on the back of that Land Rover. Let's just watch these scenes.
it was Anne who walked behind his coffin beside Charles, showing strength without saying a word. And when the Queen passed in 2022, Anne accompanied the late monarch's coffin during its journey through Scotland. That was personal devotion and unshakable duty. And naturally, one would ask, Princess Anne has been one of the few voices guiding Charles during his illness. Could the king have entrusted her with something meant to be passed along to William? Keep watching to find out. Balancing royal duty and family heartbreak. From the outside, it may seem like Prince William has been prepared for this role all his life. And in some ways, that's true. He was raised knowing that one day he'd be king. But no one can truly prepare for what happens when the future starts arriving much faster than expected, and all while dealing with the pain of watching both parents suffer in real time. Just when the family was still adjusting to Charles's illness, Catherine's diagnosis also came as another blow.
At 6, the Princess of Wales has just announced that she is undergoing treatment for cancer. Here now is a very personal message from her.
In March 2024, after weeks of public absence and growing concern, the Princess of Wales released a video message confirming that she too was undergoing cancer treatment. Her tone was calm, but her words revealed the serious nature of what the family was facing. Suddenly, William wasn't just covering for the king. He was also a full-time husband and father supporting his wife through something no one ever plans for. He paused his duties immediately after Catherine's announcement. Public engagements were cancelled. Appearances were delayed. There were no updates for weeks. And when he finally returned, observers noted how during an event at a food distribution charity, William smiled and shook hands, but cameras caught moments where he looked distant and almost distracted. Body language experts pointed out his stiff posture and lack of eye contact. It was subtle, but the emotional toll was showing. He later admitted that Catherine's illness had a long way to go, and thanked the public for their support. Still, few could imagine what it meant to carry that emotional weight, while stepping in more and more for a father whose own health remained fragile. This is the kind of strain that doesn't always make headlines, but it sits beneath the surface. Every time William stands before a camera now, the public sees not just a future king, but a man trying to balance family heartbreak with royal responsibility. And the reality is, more people are starting to look at him as the one who may have to take the crown far sooner than anyone expected. He's now in a position where there's almost no space to breathe. His father's illness is still being managed. His wife is in recovery. His 3 children need him more than ever. And yet, the public, the press, and even his own institutions still expect him to carry on, smile, and lead. The question then isn't whether William is next in line. It's whether he has time to grieve, to recover, or even to prepare. Now, the bond between King Charles and Princess Anne has been shaped over decades, mostly out of view. They were born just 2 years apart, grew up together under the watchful eyes of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, and shared the same upbringing inside Buckingham Palace's structured world. In a family where emotion is often kept behind closed doors, Charles and Anne developed a unique understanding of each other, grounded in shared experience rather than sentimental display. From their earliest public duties, the difference was clear. Charles was the heir, destined for kingship. Anne was the spare, free from that weight but not without purpose. She quickly carved her own path, focusing on work, discipline, and duty. Unlike their younger siblings, Andrew and Edward, Charles and Anne were forged under the pressure of being the Queen's first children, at a time when royal expectations were strict and privacy was rare. That early bond didn't fade as they grew older. In fact, Anne's position outside the direct line of succession may have strengthened their relationship. She had nothing to prove, and Charles knew it. When he faced pressure from the press, the public, or even within the palace, Anne remained one of the few people he could speak to freely. Their roles were different, but their loyalty to the institution was identical. And that built trust. There have been moments over the years that suggest how much Charles leans on Anne during difficult stretches in his life. Whether it was his divorce, tensions with the press, or transitions in the monarchy, Anne was often the one keeping the family's focus on duty. She doesn't meddle, but she also doesn't back down when she feels something needs to be said. Those traits have made her one of Charles' closest allies behind the scenes, even if the world rarely sees it. History shows that sibling alliances have long shaped royal transitions. Queen Elizabeth II and Princess Margaret had a famously complex relationship, yet even in their differences, they were deeply connected. Elizabeth leaned on Margaret's social instincts and loyalty, especially during the early years of her reign. It's a pattern that has repeated in various forms. The heir and the sibling, bound by duty and blood, standing side by side through moments of change. Now, with Charles facing a battle with cancer and the weight of the crown growing heavier each day, many wonder what kinds of conversations might be happening behind palace doors. If there were to be a final request, a personal instruction or message from the king, it could be practical, involving asking Anne to help guide William, to offer support when Charles no longer can, to steady the family if public pressure threatens to overwhelm them, or simply to ensure that no matter what happens, the monarchy's future remains united. Anne has the seniority, the trust, and the emotional distance to take on such a role. Not as a substitute monarch, but as the invisible bridge between the present and what comes next. In the royal family, so much happens away from microphones, but the patterns are there for those who know where to look. In the public eye, absence often speaks louder than words. And lately, the disappearance of both King Charles and Princess Catherine from regular royal duties has created a space everyone can see. That space has been filled almost by default by Prince William. At recent events like the D-Day commemorations or his solo visits to official ceremonies, commentators couldn't help but point out how William carried himself. There was formality in his tone, weight in his posture, the kind of presence usually expected from a reigning monarch. Even headlines began to shift, with phrases like "future king in action" or "acting as head of state in all but name." No official titles have changed. Charles remains king, but symbolically, William is already being framed as the one holding things together. This unspoken shift has emotional weight, especially for those who followed the royal family through previous transitions. When Queen Elizabeth II lost her father and suddenly became queen at just 25, there was a similar moment where the public, sensing the inevitable, began looking at her differently before any crown touched her head. The same happened in her final years, when Charles started taking over key responsibilities even while she still reigned. Now, that pattern seems to be repeating. The crown doesn't just pass through official ceremonies, it also passes through the eyes of the people slowly, emotionally, and symbolically before it becomes real. So if William is already standing in that space, even unofficially, how long can the royal family keep pretending this isn't already a transition? Queen Camilla and the royal family's uncertain future. Queen Camilla's silence in recent months hasn't gone unnoticed. While King Charles battles illness and the royal household adapts behind the scenes, Camilla has remained mostly quiet, measured in her words, composed in her actions. She's continued with some public duties, always calm, always collected. But beyond her smiles and simple appearances, it's her strength that stands out. It reminds many of how Queen Elizabeth II once handled crisis with presence, not performance. As you know, Camilla's role in the monarchy is complex. She was briefly the queen consort after Queen Elizabeth's death, yes, but not part of the direct line of succession. Her job is to support the king, not shape what comes after him. Yet in moments like this, when the monarch is absent and the heir is under pressure, Camilla sits in the middle of it all. She's close enough to see the cracks forming, but not in a position to lead publicly. That makes her role less about ceremony now, and more about emotional balance behind palace walls. Aside from Princess Anne, she's Charles' most trusted confidant. Decades of shared life, through scandal, separation, and public resistance, have made them unusually bonded. He leans on her. But Camilla is likely watching, listening, and managing things others don't see, especially any tension that might grow between Princess Anne and Prince William. Anne and William are both strong, duty-driven personalities. But they come from different generations, and they don't always see the world the same way. If disagreements are surfacing over how to handle royal transitions, public messaging, or internal family responsibilities, Camilla may be one of the few people with the personal capital to keep things steady. It's a role Queen Elizabeth once played with subtle mastery. She rarely interfered directly, but her presence was enough to cool tempers. Her silence, her timing, her authority, those things held the family together through countless storms. And now, that emotional anchor is gone. And in its place, William is being looked at as the emotional head of a fractured family. That kind of pressure is heavier than most can imagine. It's about absorbing the emotional burdens of a dynasty still grieving its matriarch, still adapting to its aging monarch, and still unclear on how to face what's coming next. Princess Anne has never been one to speak just for attention, but when she does share her thoughts, people take notice, especially when it comes to the monarchy's future. In a rare interview back in 2023, she made headlines by pushing back against the idea of slimming down the royal family too quickly. Her message was that efficiency should not come at the cost of experience and service. Anne has always believed in a hands-on approach. She's carried out more royal engagements than nearly anyone else, often without fanfare. To her, the monarchy is about showing up, getting the work done, and honoring tradition. That's why talk of modernizing the institution, especially when it involves reducing its size, doesn't sit easily with her. Prince William, on the other hand, has made it clear over time that he's open to reform. He's more selective about his public appearances, more strategic in how he wants the monarchy to be seen. The idea of a leaner, more focused royal team fits with how he sees the future, as it will be less ceremonial, more relatable, and perhaps more media-aware. This is where the friction may exist between the two. Anne sees value in consistency, in the bench of royals who serve without headlines. William sees the need for change in order to preserve public support. Neither of them is necessarily wrong, but their approaches come from different places, shaped by different eras and different kinds of pressure. If Charles had to make a final request, it might sit right here between them, a request to keep the monarchy united, even when visions for its future differ. A call for balance, tradition without stagnation, reform without division. But if their ideas are pulling in opposite directions, can they find a middle ground before the crown eventually changes hands? Meanwhile, Prince Harry's absence casts a long shadow over everything Prince William is dealing with right now. This is an emotional fracture that's never really healed. At a time when the royal family feels stretched thin, with the king unwell and the Princess of Wales battling cancer, William is managing it all without the one person who used to be by his side during every storm. There's been no sign that Harry will return in any meaningful capacity, even temporarily. And while he made a short visit earlier this year to the UK, reports are conflicting about whether or not he met with the king. That sort of news doesn't rebuild years of distance. What it does, though, is remind William just how much has changed. The brother who once helped him carry emotional weight is now watching everything unfold from another continent. King Charles, for his part, has tried to keep the door open to reconciliation. At different points, sources close to the palace have said the king hopes for peace in his lifetime. But any hopes for that peace have likely run into a wall of silence or resistance. If Princess Anne has had a say in those private talks, it's unclear whether she encouraged a healing path or advised Charles to protect the crown first. Anne has always been duty first. Her focus is on the institution, not individual feelings. Still, the emotional cost of Harry's absence isn't just about family bonds. It also changes what William is able to do. With fewer senior royals actively working and a shrinking circle of trusted support, the burden on William is heavier. Now he has to fill in the emotional gaps left by his mother, his brother, and in some ways his wife too, as she focuses on recovery. This brings us to the reality of the end of one royal era and the difficult, unsteady beginning of another. Queen Elizabeth. The second's death marked more than the loss of a monarch. It was the end of a generation that held the family together firmly. Charles stepping in was expected, but now his health has turned the spotlight away from a stable transition and toward uncertainty. The monarchy is still here, but it feels fragile. Confidence has taken a hit, family unity looks frayed, and the next phase feels emotionally loaded, especially for William. He's the face everyone looks to, but behind that face is a man carrying more than anyone truly knows. He appears composed. He shows up. He speaks with care, but beneath it all, the signs are there. Cancelled appearances, prolonged absences, and the weight of grief that never gets publicly named. He is holding the monarchy together piece by piece, but there's something about the way he walks now, the way his eyes drift in interviews, that makes it hard to believe he isn't quietly collapsing inside. And maybe that's what people are feeling. Not a dramatic fall, not a public breakdown, but a slow crumble beneath the surface. A moment when the next king is being shaped not by ceremony, but by loss, pressure, and the aching silence of everything that's changed. What do you think Princess Anne really told the king in those private moments, and could it shape everything Prince William must carry from here? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.